Welcome to Recovering Out Loud podcast. The opinions expressed here are those of the individuals and not of any organization.
That's not who you are as a person.
Yeah.
So for me, it was really separating the person from the disease was helpful too, even just like with healing too, because then it was like, okay, if I can separate it, then I can say when he was in full-blown addiction, like anything he said or did, like that wasn't him. That's not something that he would do. He didn't mean it. That's the disease taking over.
All right, we made it. We're having some technical difficulties today, but you know what? We're going to get it done, and we're resilient. We're a resilient bunch. So, with today's a special episode, and I'm looking forward to having more guests on. And you know, our first one is a special guest. This is my sister, Stephanie. She's been through a lot of my addiction in the beginning, especially when I didn't know about recovery at all. So she has a unique perspective that I hope can help some people. But I'm going to shut up and let her take over. And we're just glad to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, why don't you tell us, Steph, what was it like dealing with somebody in addiction? And then you can talk about what it's like now and maybe the change. But, you know, I want to hear your perspective of what it was like kind of watching that and what you did about it and what you learned, but we'll get into that. So,
okay. I'll just start by saying, Anthony mentioned on his previous podcast that I'm a doctor, but I just want to start off by saying that I'm just here as Anthony's sister. I'm not an addiction specialist. I'm not going to claim to be an addiction specialist. I don't work with people with addiction. So these are just all my personal experiences and things that I went through specifically. So just starting off, if we kind of think back to the beginning when Anthony was first suffering, it was probably around like end of high school when things started to pick up, maybe like when I started university. So I think for me, a lot of it was I was able to kind of take myself away from the situation because I was really into my studies and I was away for university. So I kind of had the luxury of an escape away from everything that was going on. And I think that actually was a big coping mechanism for me, was to kind of take myself out of the situation, which I know that not everybody has that luxury. I know that my parents weren't able to do that and had to kind of be around it more.
Yeah, I held them hostage for a long time.
Yeah, so that was a little bit of a saving grace, I would say, for the beginning. I think one of the big coping mechanisms that I had was denial. I think that was a big thing for me at the beginning, especially, was
just kind of like not believing that he had a problem.
Not believing that he had a problem, exactly, and just kind of brushing it under the rug. And I even kind of saw that kind of come back around, even the second time around when Anthony was struggling more recently, just trying to make myself believe that it wasn't true. And if it didn't exist, then it's not something that I had to deal with. And it was just easier to cope with it that way. So that was a big thing for me. But one of the moments that I really accepted and really recognized that you were struggling was one night that I was home. It was either for the weekend or the summer, and it was late at night, and I overheard you and Dad talking.
I remember this.
Yeah. And he was talking to you, and you were upset with him. He was trying to take something away from you, and I was like in bed by myself, and I remember thinking to myself, hearing that conversation, hearing him like really need what my dad was trying to take away from him, that was the moment that I was like, wow, okay.
It was cocaine. You can say it.
Okay. I don't know how much you want me to share. Yeah. So that's the moment that I realized, like, okay, he has a problem. Yeah. He's struggling, and this is serious, and this is something that I can't just brush under the rug, that I have to face and that I have to recognize is a real thing.
If I can add some more context to that story, because I think that was a pivotal moment in my addiction and recovery. And I mean, you probably have stories like this too, but I remember coming home, and you know, it was I used to stash it away in my pants because Mom and Dad had an idea. I later found this out, that my friend Chris, who, you know, possibly one of the people that helped save my life, but he would be telling Mom that I would be using too much, and I was on my way home, and So I would always hide it in my pants because I was always worried that. And so I got home and my dad kind of stopped me right at the front door. And I just remember that crippling fear feeling of like, shit, one, I'm going to get in trouble, but two, I'm not going to be able to do my drugs the way I want to do them. Right. You can probably relate to that. And he searched me. No, actually what happened is he let me go into my room and I locked the door behind me and I started, putting it out or whatever.
Your parents' house?
Upstairs. Yeah. And he broke, he busted down the door. And I remember I hid it in the stupidest place too. It was like under the fucking. There's
no good place.
Yeah, that's true. If he wants to find it, he's gonna. They're gonna find it,
exactly.
Right? So I remember he found it and he flushed it down the toilet right in front of my eyes.
Oh.
I know, and I just remember something clicked in me where I just lost it and I started crying like a baby and I just went nuts and I said, "You don't understand. I need that. I need that." And to your point, those are the words you remember.
Those are the words
right?
that I was hearing.
I need that. And I think that was a moment for me too, where I was like, holy shit, like this isn't even fun anymore. This is a necessity, not a luxury anymore. Right.
Yeah.
It used to be a luxury and then it becomes quickly a necessity. I can't have fun without it. I can't do this without it. I can't be sociable. I can't be myself. All these lies we tell ourselves, right? Because we don't want to deal with the pain inside.
Right.
And,
I have a quick question because I remember a lot of people would go up to my family, my brother, and my parents, and they like be people from the outside, right? And they would tell my parents like, "Hey, like your son is doing this and this." So like in your life at all, like, I mean, it must have happened. People would come and talk to you and tell you about Anthony, right? Like, how would that make you feel? Like, would you accept it or would you stand up for him? Like,
Yeah. My gut reaction was always to stand up for him. I never wanted people to think that Anthony is just some low life, just like not doing things properly. Like I never wanted people to think that. And I found myself covering for him, not in the sense that I was trying to enable, which I'm realizing now is a form of enabling, but because deep down, I just knew that person that was talking to me wouldn't understand and would judge him. And I didn't want that to happen. So I would try and cover for him for the most part, but it would be hard to hear. It would be hard. Even more recently, like my husband, Carlo, was saying that he had friends come to him and say, "Hey, I saw Anthony in a bar. Like, is everything okay?" And you're you end up in the situation where it's like, you're kind of caught where it's like, I can't cover for him anymore. Like, no, he's struggling. He's not in a good situation.
And that's a tough situation to be in because I like vividly remember a moment where my brother had told me he was at the bar actually. And my brother, he's not like us. My brother can go to a bar and, not wake up the next morning and spend all his money and not make his truck payments and lose all this stuff. He can keep it kind of controlled. But anyways, my brother said he was at the bar one night and one of our friends, a guy we were both friends with, come up to him and essentially was saying some of the things I was doing. And my brother was like, "You literally put me in a position where I had to lie to this guy because I love you so much, and I couldn't let someone just spit on my brother's name like that." He's like, "You're making me look like an idiot,"
Right.
And I could tell like in his eyes how much that had bothered him, right? And believe it or not, that didn't make me change at all. I just kept doing what I was doing. But I remember those moments, right? And like I put a lot of I feel like maybe even shame and guilt on my parents and my family after because I remember my mom saying to me, "Watts, like, this is not how I raised you. This is not what I brought you up to do." And it's completely true. That's not at all how my parents raised me. But, I think it's just I think it's horrible feeling what families go through, right? And like, especially you guys seem like you guys are very close. Like I have a very, very close relationship with my brother. And, I put that kid through hell, especially like we're the older siblings, right? So I was always raised to like show a good example for my brother and be a big brother. But like, I look back on my, last 6-7 years of life, and I definitely wasn't that like, my brother at the age of 20, he was 18 and he had more than me, right? Like, he has a truck, a house, right? I lost all that, you know what I mean? And not that that's what makes you in life, but just I should have been able to show my brother like, hey, this is
role model,
a role model, right? And actually my little brother was my role model, to be honest, but it's it's horrible what you guys have to go through. But one question I want to ask, so you were younger than Anthony, right? You said you're how many years younger than Anthony?
2 years younger.
2 years younger. So you would have been in like when did you start using Anthony?
Yeah, so I got high school was like I think I was still recreationally using in high school. I didn't really think I had a problem that escalated the way it is that we talk about until I was probably in, my first year of university, 21, 22, because I got into recovery at 23. So for me, it was like 2 or 3 years from 20 to 23 where it just went like straight up. The consequences got bigger. I lost a lot of money. I couldn't keep things together. I couldn't keep relationships. People didn't want to hang out with me. So probably around 23. So you would have been around 20, 21. So you answered the question I was going to ask already, but I guess that was the moment that you knew that I kind of crossed the line from recreational user into full-blown addict, right?
Yeah. I think there were signs ahead of time as well. And I'm sure that other families see this too, where you kind of think about it, but you don't want to believe it. So you kind of justify it in your head. So there were probably earlier signs that I just kind of passed off. And even when you were struggling more recently, like if mom or dad would come to me and say, hey, Anthony's slurring his speech, like what's going on? And, I would just kind of justify and try and think of a different solution because I didn't want to believe the reality. So, I would be like, oh, it's probably just that medication side effect that he's on, even though knowing deep down that's not a medication side effect, but it's just easier to make up
like lie
a
to
false reality.
Almost, yeah.
Exactly. Than to face
it's kind of crazy to hear that, Anthony. Like stuff that goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, you have no idea until
we're out, getting high, and then families making phone calls in the back, like, my son's slurring his speech, and just like we were just out there just mindlessly, carelessly using.
Well, they talk about it a lot too, is like, and I found since I've been in recovery, I found everyone kind of feels this way, is like, we think that we don't harm anyone but ourselves, but that's not the case at all. We're like a tornado. I say this often. We're like a tornado roaring through our house, right? And then we get sober and we wake up and we're like, well, what's the problem here? And there's shit all over the floor. Like the house is in shambles and we're like, I'm good now. I'm sober. Like, let's go. Let's heal. Why aren't you trusting me anymore? Why don't you give me the car? Why don't you? And it's like, everyone heals at a different rate. I've since learned that you can't force anyone to heal, just like nobody could force me to heal and get sober, right? So I have to be mindful of that and careful of that. What would you say is the most important thing that you learned about addiction through all of this?
I think
that you didn't know before.
The main thing for me was separating the person from the disease. Like, I think recognizing that it's so easy to just, look at somebody and judge them and say this person, like they're just doing this to themselves and, they don't want to get help. It's so easy to just look at somebody and judge them, but recognizing that this is a medical disease, it's a psychological disease, it's something that you can't control. And recognizing that when you're in that full-blown addiction mode, you're not yourself. Like, that's the disease taking over. Like, that's not you talking. Those aren't your actions. That's not who you are as a person. Yeah. So for me, it was really separating the person from the disease was helpful too, even just like with healing too, because then it was like, okay, if I can separate it, then I can say when he was in full-blown addiction, like anything he said or did, like that wasn't him. That's not something that he would do. He didn't mean it. That's the disease taking over. And if you kind of just think about it that way, I think it's easier to kind of accept when you're sober and when you're healing and forgive things that happened in the past. Yeah. So I think that was the main thing that I learned.
Wow.
Did you guys talk lots like when you were in your addiction, like last time?
That's what I was going to get into. It's a good point. Like honestly, we hated each other. I think compared to what we are now, like I think we've gotten really close over this time. Yeah. But I always back in my addiction, I just saw you as kind of, this is going to sound bad, but I mean, everyone was kind of like this. You were kind of like just a roadblock in my way of getting high, right? Yeah. And that just because you loved me and cared for me, right? But I remember even growing up, you had this, I don't know why I'm remembering this now, but on your desk, you had this like picture of like a weed leaf with like an X
classic me.
Stephanie was such a good kid growing up, and you still are.
I was such a goody two shoes.
Yeah, but she had a picture of like a marijuana leaf, and it was just like an X through it. And it was like she took a hard stance on marijuana back in 2000.
Oh my god! I used to give presentations on why people shouldn't smoke. That's awesome. This is why I went into medicine.
I love it. But I vividly remember that. So I immediately saw you as like a roadblock in my getting high and getting what I wanted. Right? When meanwhile you're just trying to help me and save my life.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up that point, Caleb, about not talking, because actually when Anthony was in his full-blown addiction mode, like I didn't want to call call him. Like I felt guilty because I wanted to call to check in to see, you know, if he was alive and make sure that he was okay. But I was scared of who I was going to get on the other line.
Yeah.
Like
Jekyll
I knew
and Hyde.
exactly.
Yeah.
I knew that if I called you, it wouldn't be the person that I know. You would be sounding different. You'd be sounding off, and it would make me sad. And I felt guilty about that I like didn't want to talk to him and I didn't want to call him. But I'm sure there's people out there that can relate to that. I think that's a very real and
So what did you do?
feeling.
Like, how did you handle that?
I would either text you just to make sure that you're alive, because that was just easier than not hearing your voice, because I could always tell when you're high.
Yeah.
Or I would ask mom if you're alive, and I would just be like, when did you talk to him last? How is he doing? You know, and it would still be sad to go through that route, because like that was hard for her to hear or to see you in that state too. But at least I knew that you were alive.
My mother told me this once I gone to rehab. It was probably like a couple weeks in, and we were talking about like how things were between us. And I remember like every like week, this is probably like for the last 3 months before I went and got help, right? It got real bad. And like every week, sometimes twice a week, my mom would just show up like on her lunch break or coffee break and like drop off 2 batteries. Like, here, these are for your smoke alarm. Or like drop off like something like a light bulb. Like, hey, like I'm pretty sure there's a dead light in your house. Change your light. I'm like, what are you? And I get mad. Like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Right?
Later.
And she told me later on, she's like, I was just coming to make sure you were alive, right? Because it was the same thing. She couldn't just call, and she could call, but like either I wouldn't answer or she'd call and I'd freak out on her about something, right? Like I was like a cannon. And I remember when I heard that, I was like, holy crap.
That hits hard, eh?
It hits hard, right? Because I remember I didn't really think I was like every addict. I didn't think I was that bad, right? And like, this is my first kick at the can of getting sober. I never like had to go through relapse, thank God, or anything yet. Right,
Nice.
I always say that like Anthony says that.
You always say yet.
But I remember when I
flipped
like
yet.
a couple of weeks had went by and I got a little bit of fog out of my brain. I looked back at the picture of what I looked like the day I went into rehab, and I was like, I literally looked like I was gonna die. Like there was no color in my face.
Yeah, you were great. You were a skeleton.
You know, one eye was going this way, and I looked horrible, right? And I remember I was like, no shit, my parents come and drop, light bulbs and batteries off to make sure I was alive. Like I can't imagine that feeling, being a mother and, wondering if your kid is still alive or not. That's like, there's nothing that'll ever be able to make me know what that feels like, right?
Yeah,
but that's
exactly.
horrible.
As I sit here, I just think, imagine you had a buddy or a child or something that your only relationship was you checking in on them if
that's
they're alive.
horrible.
Just think about that for a moment, That's why I love doing this stuff. I'm happy you came on, because it's important for me to shift my perspective and look at the damage I've caused. It doesn't just go away.
Yeah.
I have to make amends. And to me, what that means today is living better, not doing it again, right? Not doing things that I used to do again. I remember there was one time specifically in my recent one, and you helped me a lot on this one. I remember it, and I still think about it to this day, but that I got into a car accident on the highway, and I was in a benzo blackout, and it came out of nowhere. I was completely fine. I have a video of myself I was doing something for a friend. I was shooting a video, and I was completely sober in the video. And then not an hour later, half an hour later after that video, I was on the road going to my buddy's house. Actually, I was going to ask him to be in my wedding party. So it was like a pretty significant moment in my life. And I hadn't slept the night before, and I think I'd taken some benzos like before that. And the thing with benzos and stimulants, for anyone that doesn't know, when you mix benzos and stimulants, in my experience, and what I've read around, is the benzos they kind of get blocked out by the stimulants. Like and so it takes some time for the benzos to kick in.
But when they kick in,
it's like a brick wall. And then you forget that you took so many. So you end up taking like 5 more. Yeah. And then all of a sudden the stimulant high wears off, and you just immediately black out. So that's what happened to me. Hit a bus. I remember calling.
You hit a bus?
I hit a bus on the highway, and I managed to not hurt anyone, not hurt myself. It was, I thank God, like that was a warning sign that I ignored again, and I called my sister, and this was in a blackout. I remember talking to the bus driver, exchanging like licenses or whatever. And I called you, and I asked you, the first thing I said is, Steph, is it safe to drive on benzos? And, I don't know I think that was like me reaching out for help, right? And you're like, no, what's wrong with you? No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I was like, why are you on benzos?
Right,
like, there's no situation that you should be on benzos.
Yeah, it was the middle of the day. And what did you do? The next day, you came and went to a meeting with me, right? And we went for ice cream after.
Wow.
It was amazing. Those little moments. But you learned that over time. That wasn't your first reaction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think it's important for people that's a way of support. You know, what I appreciated, and I'm sure you would appreciate this too, is you didn't call me an idiot. You didn't say, what are you fucking doing again, man? Like, you're such a moron. You didn't make me feel less than, right? I always say to people, you don't need to beat him up. He's doing enough himself, right? I was beating myself up enough. I knew I shouldn't have been doing that stuff.
Right.
I knew I needed to go back to recovery.
Yeah.
And all you did was show up. We went to a meeting, and that helped me so much, right? I've told that story a million times. That's what support looks like to me today. It might look different for other people, but showing up is 90% of the battle, right?
Yeah.
And so I appreciated that. What do you remember about that situation?
Yeah, no, I'm glad that helped you. I remember just hearing, as soon as you said the words, is it safe to drive on benzos? My heart just sank because I was like, oh shit. Like, I know that something's wrong now. Like, he's back in it. Like, this is not going to go well.
You didn't know that I had relapsed yet.
Yeah, that was the turning point.
Yeah.
Because that was after the times that my parents had already been saying, you know, Anthony's speech is a little bit slurred, and I had already been denying it. So again, it was like another switch wake up point for me was when he said that. So that was like very scary for me. And then seeing you the next day, I was happy that I was able to go to a meeting and that you agreed to go to a meeting. And even the next day we still went. So that gave me a little bit of hope too. Yeah. But I knew that it wasn't looking good at that moment.
Yeah. But I mean, you did everything you could.
Like, I hear that story, and that's incredible because, like, I have a very good relationship with my brother, but like, to have a sister like that who, you know, after you just called her and told her you hit a bus and you're high on benzos, I mean, like, I think most people's first reaction is going to be to, you idiot, you know, right? But like, let's go to a meeting the next day, right? Like, that's someone who loves someone. Yeah. And I remember even in my most messed up days, like, after I'd blow my whole entire paycheck on drugs and have, 5 days with no pay, I'd call my brother and be like, hey, I need $50 to go get some food. And he'd bring me to go get food, right? Yeah. And he'd call me an idiot in the truck, but he'd still go buy me food and he'd come in and hang out with me, right? And like, I think about it, and like, that's a guy who wrote it out with me the entire time, and tried to just be there for me, right? He never really freaked out on me. I'm sure there was times we got into fights, but like, he would always just be like, like, dude, like, you're so much better than this. Yeah. He would try, and I think for people who watch their loved ones suffer with addiction, they don't actually know what to do. You know what I mean? Like, they have no idea what to do. Like, I talk to my parents about it all the time. And they're like, they say that all the time. We had no idea what to do. They had reached out to professional help. And then, a month later, I was in rehab. But before that, they didn't know if, they were enabling me. They didn't realize it. Then they'd try the freak out route. That wouldn't work because I would just freak out on them, right? And it's like, it's such a hard route to navigate watching, a son or a sibling or whoever it is in your family suffer from addiction, right? And like, it's, what do you do? You know what I mean?
What do you say? I think what's the right thing to say?
Right? Yeah. We're the lucky ones, man, because I know lots of people now, since I've been in recovery, that their rock bottom was a casket and their families didn't know what to do, right? And I'm sure for the whole time watching them, they wish they could have done something. So, we're so lucky, man, to have families like we do.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. I know, Seth, that you mentioned at the beginning, at the top, that you kind of hid away in your books a lot. That was one thing I noticed too when we were growing up, is like, you spent a lot of time studying, right? And it's interesting to hear you say it was a coping mechanism for you, because it helped you deal with whatever emotions or, but you were doing that even before I was in addiction, right? And I think you were just very passionate about school. It's paid off, obviously. Right. Excuse me. You've completed medical school. You've gotten through that. But I remember, and this is more related to, your mental health. It's a high pressure industry, right? From what I've heard, and my friends in the medical field, and it's not easy. There's no sleep. There's a lot of pressure. It's very hard to get into a school in Canada, like almost impossible, right? How did you deal with it, and how do you deal with the stress, the pressure of, this anxiety and mental health? Yeah,
it's tough. It's honestly tough. And I think what works for me might not work for other people. Yeah. And it's really just, it's different for every individual, but it is hard. It's a hard job in general. It's hard to hear, people's stories and be around sadness in the hospitals and things. And that in itself can take a toll on your mental health in general. And then you add in, like Anthony's saying, all the long hours and studying
Lack
and
of sleep.
you know, lack of sleep and everything. And it really is tough. I think what works for me is just really making sure that I have good strategies for wellness, taking time to myself, taking time away from work, and, you know, spending time with family, spending time with friends, making sure that I prioritize those things. And I think that's one thing that I struggled to do growing up, that I realized that I prioritized studying when I was growing up and before going into medical school. And I, you know, would miss family events because I had to study, because I had to do, you know, whatever test was coming up. And I don't think that's the way to do it. I think it's important you have to take a break. The break is equally as important as studying, because you can't be in it constantly. So that, making sure that I have time for family, and then honestly seeking professional help, having counselors, somebody to talk to about these things. It's helpful. It's not something to be ashamed of, even in a professional industry, that everybody needs it. I think everybody should have a counselor. I think
agree.
it's helpful to have a psychologist in general, just to have somebody who is a professional talk to you and give strategies on coping mechanisms, I think has been very helpful, because I don't think that my coping mechanisms were healthy growing up. Like, avoiding my problems was not a sustainable coping mechanism.
I'll deal with this tomorrow.
Yeah.
Sweep it under the rug.
When someone
Exactly.
ever like, the hardest question to answer is like, what did you do to get better? Right? Like, it's like, it sounds like an easy question, but like,
it's such a complex.
it's such a
process.
Yeah.
So since we've started this podcast, since we started this podcast, actually, I've had quite a few people reach out, whether it was, most of it actually wasn't even people who were struggling with addiction. It's like more mental health people, right? And like, I'm by no means a counselor at all. But when people ask me that, and I had mentioned this in one of the previous podcasts, I just say professional help, like counseling. And that is something I never, ever, ever did until I went to rehab. But like, so much, I think one of the biggest, you know, stigmas out there for not just men, but everyone, is like not talking about how you feel, right?
Yeah.
There's just something about going in a room with a counselor, someone, you know, most of the time it's someone you don't know, right? And they ask you those tough questions, and you just kind of like surrender and say, you know, screw it. This is what's going on. This is how I feel.
I'm struggling.
There's just something
Right.
about that, right? And so, yeah, whenever someone asks me that question, I usually just say, you know, professional help, go talk to a counselor, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, like, you know, you're not struggling with addiction. You're struggling with something completely different, but that helps you.
Yeah.
Right.
And just even the weight lifted off, as when you tell somebody about something that's bothering
something
you,
inside is,
even just telling, you know, a friend or something, just like saying it out loud. You've mentioned it in your podcast before. Like, it's so helpful to just get it out there. If you bottle it up inside and you keep it inside, like, it just eats at you.
Yeah. It gets worse every single day. Right. So
We talked about, that's a good point. Yeah. I mean, professional help is so important.
Yeah.
Right? It's saved my life in a lot of instances, you know, and a lot of the time I'm pissed off at what they're saying. And if you're pissed off at what your mental health professional is saying, they're probably right.
Yeah.
Right. You know?
100%.
That's what I've learned, is like, if I'm pissed off, it's probably what I need to hear, and it's probably right and accurate. And I'm just lying to myself about it. We talked about, you know, what it was like. Why don't you talk about, you know, what did me in recovery do to you and our relationship? You know, not you. That's like so ego. How did I make your life better, Stephanie? Tell me about how good I am. No, tell me about how it benefited the relationship. Right?
Yeah, no, it was you alluded to this. It was like a huge shift in our relationship when you went into recovery. Like, we just became so close.
I called you every Monday.
Every single Monday he called me when I was in medical school. Every single Monday. It was very nice.
Aww.
It was, we talked all the time. Like, we were never that close before, but even now, like, it's weird to go a week or two without talking now. Like, that's how close we've become. So just being in recovery, I think, really, really helped our relationship so much. And it just really helped us bond, and like, even just doing things together, we just enjoy doing things together.
Hiking,
exactly. And our parents love
Vacation.
seeing it. They love seeing our relationship. They get so excited.
Yeah. Mom loves when we hang out.
No, I know for sure.
Well, the kids are getting along.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it helped them too to see that our relationship strengthened so much.
And then we moved out, and then
I told my
okay.
I think it was my grandmother yesterday, that or my aunt. Someone's like, oh, like, you know, like, how's your brother doing? And I'm like, oh, good. Like, I talk to him every day. And she's like, really? You guys talk every single day? I'm like, every single day. She was so happy, right? I think like every family member loves seeing that. And one other cool thing that me and my mom were talking about the other day, she said, like, I'm so proud of you, right? And I'm just thinking, like, you know what? My mom deserves to like feel proud of their son. You know what I mean? I don't know what, maybe it's just want to mention that, but I remember my mom saying almost like she like, my mom for a long time wasn't sure how I was going to end up, right? We talk about that a lot. It's like, I didn't think you were going to make it to rehab. Like, I was scared you were going to leave and this and that. But like, you know, when someone tells, whether it's your sibling, whether it's your, you know, your parents or your loved one, whoever it is, when they say like they're proud of you, I think that person truly deserves to like be proud of you. No one deserves, especially if they're doing nothing wrong, right? Like, I know like my parents, my brother, you know, past girlfriends, they didn't do anything wrong. It was all me, right? And I think those people deserved to see a better version of me. So when my mom says that to me, I just think like, you know, you deserve this, Mom, right? Like, my mom loves talking about what we're doing, this podcast. She loves sharing it. It's like, you know, her favorite thing in the world. Yeah. And I just feel like, you know, you deserve that.
Yeah. Yeah. And plus, it's such a big shift from what we used to be like, right? You know, it's like almost like you're a new person, you know, Anthony and Caleb 2.0. Yeah. Right. If you will. So you mentioned, I really want to talk about enabling versus support,
which is a fine
line. Indeed, very fine line. You know, you come into what happened with mom and dad is they got into this counseling for themselves, right, as well as me, and that saved my life. They started telling them that, you know, what you need to do is bring the bottom up to the addict. Yeah. You know, what does that mean? Well, for one, you cut them off.
I like that analogy. That's cool.
Yeah, that's really good.
You know, you have to hit bottom, yes, but it doesn't have to be that low. Maybe we can bring the bottom up to them. And so what mom and dad did was they, you know, against their better judgment and not better judgment, but against what they wanted to do, they kicked me out. And that ultimately saved my life because I hit a new bottom emotionally that I just wanted to shower. I wanted a bed. I didn't want to surf couches and live in my car anymore. It was uncomfortable in my car. It was in the winter, you know, it was just terrible, right? And that ultimately led to, fine, I'll go to rehab. So my question to you is, how do you kind of, because I would ask you for money and stuff too, right? You know, you mentioned that. How did you skirt that line?
Yeah, honestly, it's a tough question because I still feel like I struggle with it. Like, I noticed even more recently, like, if I would notice that you were high or if I would notice that there was a problem, I would want to say something so that I'm not enabling. But then I would like have this internal battle, like, okay, if I say something and then he gets mad at me and then he never talks to me again, like that would suck. So then I end up not saying anything, but now I'm enabling him. So you end up just like constantly in this internal battle, like, what do I say? How do I say things? So I honestly haven't figured it out.
I don't think anyone has really. I think I've talked to a lot of people that haven't. Okay, but
I try and like use, you know, more like neutral. That's what counselors have said, to use more like neutral wording around it, so that like it's not, you know, I'm not saying like, no, you can't have money, and no, you know, cutting you off that way, but just kind of, I can't think of an example, but just using more neutral wording, and so it's not as like aggressive, so that you're not taking it as harshly. That's the only thing that I've tried, but it's hard. Like, or I would just lie and say, you know, sorry, I don't have money, or I don't, you know, I can't help you right now. And
that probably never felt good.
Yeah, it never felt good. That would bother me too. And especially in times when like, I know that you really needed it. Like it was hard.
Something kind of funny. I remember like my parents were telling me some of the things that the counselors and professional help was telling them, like prior to me going into rehab. And then like while I was in there, and I'd be like, man, if I would have heard what these counselors were telling my parents to do to me before I got help, I would have freaked out, you know, tell them to kick me out and all that stuff, right? But to be honest, that's what helped me. Yeah. Right? That's like being completely cut off, which was something that never happened to me because my parents, you know, they love me and they just want to help me. And their way of doing that was enabling me, right? Which they didn't know. But like hitting a rock bottom is unfortunately what has to happen.
Yeah, it's a necessity.
Like someone actually just reached out to me like a couple days ago, and they were like, hey, like there's this girl in our town struggling, and it wasn't even his daughter or anything, right? But it was a parent, and he's like, what do we do? And I said, like, honestly, man, like there's like nothing you can really say or like do to that person that's gonna just make them be like, hey, I'm done, right? Either something really bad has to happen to them, or they're just gonna have to look at their life and be like, you know what, like, which usually takes something bad happening, right? To be like, you know, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore, right?
Desperation.
Because that's basically what happened to me. I was very, very, very blessed that an opportunity would come in front of me. My parents offered to take me to rehab, but I remember like 3 days before they had offered me to go, which they were already planning something. They were talking to someone for a couple of weeks before they offered it to me and trying to figure out a way on how to approach me. I remember we had a conversation a couple nights before I left, And I still had no idea I was going to rehab at this point, right? But I think it was my dad had asked me, like, would you ever go to rehab? And I was like, honestly, man, like, I had no money, barely any food at my house. I wasn't paying my own rent or nothing. Like, life was horrible. And I was like, and I think at the time I wasn't thinking like I want to change my life. I was just like, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to live like this anymore. I wasn't trying to think like, okay, I'm Mr. Recovery now. I was just like, I have nothing, right? It was just like my only other option. And thankfully, as time went on in rehab, I got some new goggles to look at life. But at that time, I think it was just kind of like I just put my hands up and was like, you know what, there's something else in this, right?
That's interesting. It's almost like he caught you at the perfect moment.
That was
because
it, man.
we go through moments in addiction where we've had enough and we're sick of it. And then it's like quickly replaced by, that wasn't that bad.
Yeah. 3 days later, you're getting high again.
Exactly. It's the only disease that tells you don't have a disease, right?
Yeah.
And I found that to be true. I was overreacting. Rehab. That's a little much, don't you think?
Yeah.
Like, let's tone it down. I can control it this time. No. I didn't do it this way. I got to take this one before this one, this drug, and then it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Try it, bang your head against the wall, and it gets worse, right? But I think it sounds like your dad just caught you in a perfect moment of desperation where you were like, man, I don't want to get better, but I don't want to live this way anymore. I'll do anything to not go back there.
Yeah, and that was it. And
So maybe like planting the seed might help somebody, right? Just planting the seed. Like, hey, what do you feel about it? He didn't tell you to go to rehab.
No.
He just, what do you feel about this?
Yeah, and I just said life was so horrible. And that's the thing. They say drugs work until they don't, right? For a long, long time, like, I thought
they were fun.
Thought stuff was amazing. I was getting high every day. I was going to work. I was happy because I was high. And then all of a sudden, drugs kind of stopped working, and I was needing to spend so much money, which I didn't really have anymore, to get high. And I wasn't really getting high anymore. And everyone's mad at you, and no one wants to hang around you, and you become so alone, right? And that's what it was for me. Like, life was in a dark, dark, dark place. And my dad asked me if I'd go, and my mother, but I remember my dad was the one who said the words. It was me, my mom, and my dad on the couch at their house. He had called me. He said, hey, come over. And he'd come and pick me up, he brought me to the house, and then we had that conversation. I remember I was like in tears, crying, right? And I said to my mom, because my parents don't use drugs. They never have. And they said, well, like, why do you use so much drugs, right? And that was a question that was asked to me for a long, long, long time that I never had the answer for. But I remember looking back on it now, I kind of just told them I was powerless in a way. I said, like, Mom, this conversation that we're having right now, we're having it because I am high and I can talk right now. But like, I would literally wake up in the mornings and not want to do anything, nothing, whether that was even the most, like, for example, I love golfing, right? Like, I wouldn't even go golfing unless I couldn't do nothing, work, talk to people, leave my house. I needed to be high. So my whole entire day would be revolved around getting high and then having more for after my buzz wears off. And I just told them that. I'm like, kind of like you said to your dad, like, I need this. That's kind of what I said to them, right? And I remember my parents would always have like a reaction to something I'd say. When I said that, I remember my mom and my dad were just like, oh, like, I never actually said that to them, right? Like, I need it, right? And I remember they kind of understood, like, holy, like, okay, he really does need help.
I think that was the first time I told the truth.
Ever, that's what I did. I lied to them so much, but I literally just told them the truth. I was like, I need this stuff.
I can't stop. If, we talked about enabling. I know, I'm like you. I don't think I've figured it out. Like, if someone were to ask me and say, how do I not enable you? Or how do I support you without enabling you? Some days I cannot answer that. Some days I don't know what it looks like. I think ultimately what support is not is giving an addict money that, because it never gets used. There's some addict watching this like, fuck you, man. No.
Let me tell you a funny story. This I think I told you this on the phone. I was getting off the subway station downtown. I think it was. Anyways, a guy had asked me for some money, right? And like, I like to help out as much as I can. I don't know. I've never been surrounded by homeless people in my life until I moved here. So like, it genuinely breaks my heart when I see it. So anyways, this guy had asked me for a few bucks, and I said, do you want some food or something? I'll go buy you some food. And he's like, no, I need a tent. I'm like, okay, well, how much does a tent cost, right? He said $10 or something. I said, tent is more than $10. So I'll go buy you a tent. And he said, no, can you just give me the $10, man? Like, I'm like, I'll go buy you a tent. I said, you can come with me or you can stay right here. And I remember when I said those words, I'm like, oh boy, like, I'm going to have to bring this guy to Walmart to buy a tent now.
My buddy. Yeah.
But I was going to do it. And he said, man, just please give me the $10. And I said, listen, I said, just tell me you're going to go buy drugs. I'm not going to judge you. I said, I've been a drug addict too. Like, just tell me. And then he said, yeah, man. He's like, I feel like shit right now and I just need to go get high. And I said, I was put in a very tough predicament. I wanted to give him the money, but I ended up giving him a couple bucks where I knew you could go buy a bite of food. I knew what it was going to, right? But it was a tough situation to be be in, right?
Yeah.
I just,
been there. Yeah, you've been there.
Even a guy who is homeless, who you think doesn't care what anyone sees because he's sitting, at a station where people are watching him walk, like people are walking by him, and he's sitting there on the ground with a cup. That guy still doesn't want to admit he's a drug addict. You know what I mean? Mm. So it's like that's the hardest part of this entire disease, is just admitting this is my life sucks. Yeah. I just need to get high every day. Right. And until I truthfully did that, things got better.
Yeah. I mean, they say the 3 most important things in recovery. It's like, how do you get sober? H, honesty. O, open-mindedness. W, willingness. How, right?
I like that.
Yeah, I need to be honest with myself. I'm fucked up. I need to be open-minded. Maybe there's another way I can do this instead of trying to do it my way. And then willingness. Okay, now I have the other way because someone's told me that's been sober. I'm going to do it and shut up and stop putting my opinion into everything because it's worked for him. So now I'm going to try it, right?
Right.
If you could say one thing to somebody that was in your position, somebody that's struggling with an addict that can't stop, an alcoholic that can't stop, their wife, their husband, their brother, their son, their sister, what would you say to that person?
I would probably say talk to somebody about it, get help, because it's okay to not know what to do. It's normal to not know what to do, to not have the answer, but there's somebody out there that does. Yeah. There's somebody out there that can help, that can even just like for your own mental health can help you get through your situation. Another thing that I felt guilty about during this whole process was my own mental health. Like it was like this isn't my disease. Like, why am I feeling bad about it? But it's a very normal thing for yourself to also be affected, for the people around you. Like you said, Ant, that other people around you are also affected by the disease. So it's very normal and very okay for you to just need to take time for yourself and for you to just need to take care of your own mental health. So I think just reaching out, whether it's to a friend at first, if that's more comfortable for you, or whether it's to professional help to just talk to somebody about it, I think that would be my best advice.
Nice.
And I think that's like, just like it was hard for us to talk about, I think it's just as hard for family to talk about, right? No one wants to like tell their friends or other surrounding people like, yeah, my son or my brother's screwed up on drugs right now, right? That's not an easy thing to talk about. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to do, and there's because of the stigma around it too. Yeah. It's the same thing. I was in that position too, where I didn't want to tell people because I didn't know how they would react, and I didn't think that they would understand. Yeah. But I don't know. Sometimes people will surprise you. Yeah,
for sure. For sure.
You never know until you try, right?
You never know until you try. Yeah. And keeping it bottled up isn't going to help in the end. Like it's not good for you. It's not good for the person in need. It's
not good for your partner. You take it out on them.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. It comes out in other ways and it's not productive.
I think the most important thing to remember, what I was taught from somebody from your perspective, I think mom told me this. My mom. I think mom told me this. The 3 C's, and I've mentioned this before, that you can't control it, you can't cure it, and you didn't cause it. Right. It's not your fault. You didn't raise your kid to be an addict. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's just the card you got dealt. And it's what you do with it that matters.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's a disease. It's not something that anyone wants to do. Yeah. Nobody wants to be an addict. It is what it is.
Saying, when I grow up, I want to be a drug addict. I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. Yeah. But now what I've learned is that it's actually a superpower. I'm sure you can relate to that
100%,
too.
Yeah. I've been equipped with tools that I never would have been equipped with if I didn't become a drug addict. Right? I'm not saying go and be a drug addict, anyone, but I think that like I used the phrase, like it gave me an entire set of new goggles to life, right? Yeah. Like I approach situations completely different than I would have before.
Yeah. Profound alteration in my reaction to life. Yeah. That's what recovery gives me today. That's amazing. It's a beautiful thing. Love you, Steph. I'm happy you came on.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming guys. On. It was great to come on here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, hopefully someone will get something out of this. And thank you so much. Good job.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening. Please help us grow the channel and like, share, and subscribe for more content. The discussions and stories shared on this podcast are for informational and motivational purposes only. This content is not a substitute for professional medical advice, addiction treatment, or therapy. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please consult a licensed physician, addiction specialist, or mental health professional. You are no longer alone.